What if Naruto had been banished from Konoha Chapter 1, A New Era? A few days have passed since the destruction of the evil organization called Akatsuki. This organization was made up of the most dangerous criminals in the ninja world. But thanks to the valiant efforts of the ninjas of the different nations, all these criminals were eliminated and peace simply returned. Of course, not everything was happiness for some. Unfortunately for Naruto, from the day he faced pain, he showed all the power he had, and by showing that he could not control that power, he was again seen as a danger. But at the time it was not taken as of much importance. The day it was truly taken as very important was the day the Third Ninja War had already ended. And Naruto, after fighting with Sasuke in the Valley of the End, this technically left Sasuke on the brink of death. Everything seemed normal, but Naruto, after said fight with Sasuke, he simply expelled the Kepra that surrounded all the ninja nations. Said Kepra implied that not everything was the same as before and something had changed in the blonde. After said expulsion of Kepra, a week had passed. And at the time the reconstruction of Konoha occurred, among others. Now in an office we can see the Konoha Council talking about Naruto's situation, which was the danger he represented. After a few minutes, the blonde with blue eyes was simply called. And once Naruto arrived, he placed himself in front of those of the council who, looking at the blonde at the beginning, give a somewhat calm talk to him until suddenly they change their calm face to a somewhat serious one and tell the blonde that when demonstrating the power that this one had is totally impressive, but noticing that he cannot control it is a danger for every village. To which he will be banished until he shows that in truth he can with the power that he has, and only has he will be able to return to the village. Naruto, who hears this, would go to claim everything he did for the village, but there was something in the blonde that had changed, so he just finished hearing those words of the council and left without saying anything about it. After a few minutes it came to his apartment. I packed his stuff and just left immediately without saying goodbye to anyone. Once he was at the entrance of that village, just looking at the faces of the old Hokages, he remembered how the last days they simply treated him like shit, from his partner of years who was Sakura, to the same village that he had saved on several occasions. He was simply not in the mood for anything, so he was just hanging out from the village he left without knowing where he would go or what would be of his life, and from the moment without further ado he left the village where he was born and nothing was ever heard of him again. A week has passed, and at the time some who were really his friends with the blonde they searched unsuccessfully, and Tsunade, upon learning that the council acted behind his back to a huge desire to beat them to death, but she is only controlled. Since after all he did not want to get his hands dirty with some insignificant old men, and her priority would be to bring the blonde back. Meanwhile, with the village of the Leaf that week, all the inhabitants except for a few were happy about the banishment of the blonde. In addition to the fact that they also celebrated the return of Sasuke, to which he was acquitted of the betrayal and he was reincorporated into the village. Now since the day that Kyuubi he was exiled 7 years have passed, and all of that generation are now 22 years old, and a lot has happened in Konoha. As said village broke ties of peace and friendship with the Sand Village after it was learned that Naruto had been exiled. Besides that, also the village of the Leaf was in war against the village of the Rack, the Rain and the Fog. And finally that Sasuke is now considered as the ninja with the most possibilities to fill the position of Hokage as soon as Tsunade retires. Now in the Hokage office we see the members of the old Team 7, which were Kakashi, Yamato, Sai, Sakura and Sasuke, along with Ino, Shikamaru, Choji, Hinata, Shino, Kida and Akamaru, Kurenai, Gary, Lee, Tenten, Jay, Anko and a few amps who were arguing about what they would have to do in case of attack by enemy villages. The northern wall is the one you need the most vigilance. We must place more ninjas in that area just in case, since it is the point farthest from the village, and we would not give count until it was too late, said Shikamaru, staring at the blonde Hokage. I think you're right, said Tsunade, putting a hand to her head. After saying words for this in it, suddenly Shizune enters very upset and agitated. To which Tsunade, somewhat annoyed by the interruption of this question, "What's wrong?" "She appeared," said Shizune, very agitated. Who appeared?" Tsunade said, a little worried, while the other ninjas watched the scene attentively. Naruto-kun appeared," he said Shizune, staring at her teacher. After said words by this, a silence was the only thing that was in that moment. A general state of shock had seized each one of those present. Hinata, for her part, she felt her heart beating so fast that she put a hand to her chest as her breath hitched. "Where?" Tsunade said, reacting. "In the country of rice fields, some ants who were spying on some ninjas of the rack were attacked by these. But they hid in a village and the rock ninjas looked for them and began to destroy the town to find them. But in it a young man appeared and he killed the rock ninjas effortlessly." "One of the ants barely recognized that young man," said Shizune, trying to speak normally. "What are you talking about?" Kakashi said, very intrigued as he put away his book Icha. "That we found Naruto and they told me that this has changed a lot. This mortal and his hair is bigger than before. Besides that he is now a mercenary," Shizune said very seriously. "Naruto-kun is a mercenary," said Hinata, unable to believe what he was hearing. "According to the information obtained by the ant, nothing is known about him, except that he works at highest bidder and now he is heading towards the waterfall country, but we don't know why," Shizune said, looking at the blonde Hokage. "I see. Immediately that interception team be ready. I got ideas," said Tsunade very seriously. "Yes, Tsunade-sama," Shizune said, leaving through that door. "Meanwhile you go to rest and not a word of this to anyone," Tsunade said, looking at everyone. "If Hokage-sama said everyone to retreating. Naruto, I wonder how much there will be changed in all these years," thought Tsunade, very serious, and said at the same time. After that, the blonde opened one of the desk drawers and there was a box. "She is herself I take out," said box, and she opened. Inside was a picture of Naruto and Jiraiya, along with Naruto's protector and the pendant that she gave him. Meanwhile, outside the office, all the ninjas walked in silence. Each of these was engrossed in their thoughts and did not know what to say, since what would be the idea of the Hokage to know that Naruto had appeared. Meanwhile, with Sasuke only had a half smile at the thought of how strong his ex would have become teammate, a mercenary. "Interesting profession that of Naruto," said Sasuke a bit thoughtfully. "To become a mercenary he has had to change a lot. I hope he calls her of his youth is not extinct," he said, a little worried. "I hope Naruto-kun is fine," he thought, Hinata still walking and very worried. 5 hours have passed. And in the Hokage office we see Gary's team and the old Team 10 formed by Ino, Kuchi and Shikamaru and 6 Sams. "I have a mission for you. Go for Naruto and bring him whatever. I have decided to rejoin him to the village as an active ninja to help us in the war. This is the opportunity that we have. I'd been looking for him to come back. Go for him, and don't even think about coming back without him," he said, Tsunade, very serious. "Yes, Hokage-sama," all said and left the office. Each of these, after said words by Tsunade, went to his house to look for his equipment, and when they had it ready they went to the exit of the village. And when they all gathered, they only left for the waterfall country to find your old friend and companion. All these same ones ran with all their might and traveled the faster than they could until finally, after 2 days without rest, they arrived as far as the blonde is supposed to be. All of these themselves only searched for several hours for the blonde, and once at night they did not find him, so they decided to rest in the place. The next morning they were resting in the trees, but suddenly they all woke up when they felt a great Kekra approaching from where they were. To which Ino, without thinking, uses Genjutsu so that the person in question will not notice them, and meanwhile Jay used the beacon to see from a long distance who he was more exactly. He himself with his beacon saw that the one who was approaching was a man because of the shape of his body, and he was wearing a black cape and a straw hat that covered his head and did not allow his face to be seen. This guy was only slowly approaching where they were. And after a few minutes they stepped past them and continued on their way. In it, all these followed him without making noise and without using Kepker to hide their presence. All who followed the hooded man were already elite gen, and so his level was unbeatable. The stranger just followed walking, and I came to a river where I know he sat near the shore and looked out over the water. Until what time will they be hiding? Said the man with a rather serious voice. The Konoha ninjas were shocked when see that guy had even detected them with such high-level jutsu from before running into Yaifal Jutsu, and it seems that his skills like ninjas have declined over the years, haven't they? Jehikiwa, Rob Lee, Tenten, Inuyama Shikamaru Nara, Kuji Akimichi and Yumeto Gary, in addition to those amps, said the man looking in their direction. Given this, all those who had only followed the subject were only surprised at how the hell that person recognized them in a couple of seconds. And before that there was no other explanation more than that person was in Naruto. They all thought at the same time, looking at the man in the hat straw. This guy just looked at them and had a smile of half side showing one of his fangs. It's been a long time, said the subject, pulling an arm out of the cape. To later see him take off his hat. The Konoha ninjas before such an apt of Naruto were only surprised to see his former comrade, who now had hair a bit long, some of his blue eyes that showed a coldness and fear as if they were dead, and finally his face that was more mature and showed a somewhat sinister smile. To what do I owe the honor of this visit? Should be important, so that they have come to me to look after all these years, and by the way, why still not come out? He said, Naruto still grinning sinisterly. In it, all the Konoha ninjas, upon hearing this from the blonde only, came out of their hiding place, showing each of them with the regulation genin uniform, except for Lee, who he was dressed just like Gay, and Kuji that he had a suit identical to the one he wore before, and the ants who just stayed hid in case something was wrong. Naruto, is it really you? Jay said without to be able to believe the change of his friend. Of course it's me. Who did you think he was? Naruto said in a somewhat mocking tone, but without Lee that grin so macabre that was starting to scare their ancients friends of him. Is it really Naruto? Ino thought, staring at the blonde. Don't tell me I changed so much since last time they saw me, they no longer recognize. Naruto said in a tone of voice somewhat hurt but mocking. A little. You looked very different. No longer you look the same, Lee said, a little serious. In that you're right, I'm not the same, but hey, if I know what they came for. Naruto said, stopping smiling and getting serious. Tsunotsama wants you to return to Konoha so that you can be reinstated as ninja, Gare said, looking at Naruto. The blonde at Gare's words just started to laugh. And the ninjas at Konoha before such an apt of Naruto, they just did not understand what he was doing with the blonde. Let's see if I understand. You really believe that I am going back there? To you who told them that I had planned to return to that disgusting village? Naruto said, trying to quell the laughter that he had voted for. How? Why don't you want to go back? If it is your village, your home, said Lee, very worried and confused. What at home? A place where you can't sleep for fear of being killed while you sleep, and where everyone you meet and what do you consider your friends to betray you and turn your back when you need them? If that's what you're trying to do, convince me to return, you go by very bad way, Naruto said, recovering a sinister smile. Come on, Naruto, that's not true. We never betrayed you. When we found out that you had been exiled, we look everywhere but we don't. We found Ino, said, a little sad. That does not interest me. I also know that they want me to come back because Konoha is in war, and I'm not interested in getting involved in a war for people who don't deserve it. Now if you'll excuse me, I have things to do, Naruto said, putting on his hat and starting to walk. Suddenly the blonde realized that he couldn't move. Shikamaru, you still have a bad habit of paralyzing people by the shadow of him, Naruto said without much encouragement. The Hokage said, we'd take you like out, and that includes it for, said Shikamaru, very serious and thinking all the possibilities. You are very wrong if you think that this pathetic jutsu can stop me, said Naruto, walked and breaking the jutsu of Shikamaru, who didn't believe what he saw. He faded my jutsu effortlessly, he thought, Shikamaru somewhat impressed. Naruto, come with us, Lee said with a friend's look. Naruto, just ignoring his words, continues walking. If or if you will come with us even if I have to drag you, said Ninja, standing in front of the young man next to Tenten. The other ninjas except for Shikamaru only surrounded the blonde and prepared to engage in combat with him in order to bring him back to the village. It seems they want to die, Naruto said, smiling, but this time with a smile that sent a chill to each of those present. How much? Shikamaru said very seriously, drawing everyone's attention, including the Uzumakis. As that? Naruto said mockingly. How much do you ask to help us? Now you're a mercenary who works for money like this. Tell me, how much do you want to support us in the war? Shikamaru said, a little annoyed. Always so smart, he couldn't wait less than Konoha's #1 genius, Naruto said, looking at Shikamaru. How much do you want? Shikamaru said, annoyed by the Uzumaki's attitude. I don't know, it's a war, there will be many battles, many dead, wounded, days without sleep and without food. They will attack me right and sinister, also without counting that I will have them to see your face every day. I'd say about 20 million Reese. But since it is you who are 30 million, Naruto said, looking defiantly at the shadow manipulator. Are you crazy? That's a lot of money, he said, very surprised by the attitude of his old friend of his. Okay, Shikamaru said very seriously. Perfect, come on then, Naruto said, approaching young Nora. That way the group of ninjas just head towards Konoha. And as they went to the village, Naruto stayed behind the group, and during the whole journey he did not say any. He only limited himself to following his guides. After 3 days they reached the entrance of that village. And they immediately went to the Hokage's office. And once there we only see the Hokage and her assistant, who saw how the group they commanded was followed by a man with a cape, black and straw hat. Tsunotsama, how do I order it? Here it is, Naruto said. Shikamaru's Uzumaki would take off his hat and look fixedly on the woman blonde that in those moments she wanted to cry. During a few moments of silence in which no one spoke or finally moved, the Hokage reacted. I'm glad to see that you have decided to return to Konoha to help us, said Tsunotsama, very happy. Actually he refused to do it, and I had to hire him as a mercenary for 30 million Reese for him to accept help us, said Shikamaru very seriously. Is that true, Naruto? Tsunotsama said, very surprised and in pain. I actually came for the money, Naruto said, smiling sinisterly. But that's too much money, he said, Shizune, very worried. Take it or leave it and make it quick. No, I like this site, Naruto said, a little serious. I need to think about it. Until then, can you spend the night in the village and tomorrow I tell you? Tsunotsama said, trying to stay serious. Okay, I'm going to stay at the hotel. I wait for the answer. The less time spent here better, said Naruto, putting on his hat and leaving the office. As soon as the blonde left the office, the blonde couldn't take it anymore and she began to cry, while the other shinobi saw her helpless and her assistant tried to comfort her. What happened? How did Naruto change so much? Tsunotsama said between tears. While that was happening, we only see Naruto, who was walking calmly looking at the village heading towards the hotel, while he said to himself, disgusting village, full of rats, treacherous. I'd like to see her destroyed, but if they are going to pay me, I don't complain. Besides, I can always kill many ninjas in this war, said Naruto, walking slowly and looking at the houses. You should kill them all at once for this war to end, said a somewhat macabre voice within the young man's mind. It's a good idea, Kurama, but no, I'm not going to get my hands dirty with these garbage. They are not worth the trouble of killing them. I just take the money and that's it. Also, if they don't pay me, I have other idea. After these talks between these, a few hours have passed and the blonde arrived at the hotel where he would stay. He rented a room but did not leave any registered name. He lay down on the bed and fell asleep. Next chapter, Test and Discovery. Hello again, Sasuke. And so far, this theory. Do not forget to join our Discord server that is in the description of the video, and with nothing more to say, to be continued.